We now come to the last set of values that Frankl called the attitudinal values, and that elicits from us one of our most greatest assets that he called the defiant power of the human spirit. To say no to what really thwarts our search for meaning and experiencing meaning in life, and a yes to what actually enhances our sense of worthy and wonderful living. And he called this he described this ability in this way. He said it's the uniquely human potential at its best, namely to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. And let's just look at how it happened in his own life. You know, as the dark clouds of the Second World War were gathering in Austria, they were getting more and more concerned about the future of the Jewish people in that country. He had just recently married the love of his life, Tilly, and they were expecting a baby. But you know that the ruling had already come into being that any Jewish woman that was pregnant was immediately sent to the gas chambers and to a certain death. I mean, after all, the effort was to eliminate the Jewish race, so you don't want any new babies born. Frankl was desperate. He had written a book called The Unheard Cry for Meaning, because they eventually decided to abort their unborn child. He sat down in a state of desperation to capture something of his life that might just be left as a legacy. If he couldn't have a natural child of his own, that he can have a spiritual child. And he wrote down his manuscript that afterwards was rewritten and published as The Doctor and the Soul. But he only managed the manuscript, and they were then indeed, the whole family, rounded up and taken to the concentration camps. And it was in Auschwitz that Frankl finally separated from his entire family. And he was to enter his trial of suffering alone. And he described that experience in the following way. It seemed as if nothing and no one would survive me, neither a physical nor a spiritual child of my own. So I found myself confronted with the question of whether under such circumstances my life was ultimately void of any meaning. He had hid his manuscript in the inner part of his coat, which was taken from him, no matter his pleading that it was his life's work, and he was given the jacket of an inmate that had already been sent to the gas chambers. Not yet did I notice that an answer to this question with which I was wrestling so passionately was already in store for me, and that soon thereafter this answer would be given to me. This was the case when I had to surrender my clothes and in turn inherited the worn-out rags of an inmate who had already been sent to the gas chamber immediately after his arrival at the Auschwitz railway station. Instead of the many pages of my manuscript that was taken from him with his own coat, I found in a pocket of this newly acquired coat one single page torn out of a Hebrew prayer book containing the main Jewish prayer, the Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, with a command: love thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. Or, as one might interpret it as well, he wrote, the command to say yes to life, despite whatever one has to face, be it suffering or even dying. Like he said, so many Jews entered the gas chambers with a prayer on their lips. How should I have interpreted this coincidence other than as a challenge to live my thoughts instead of merely putting them down on paper? Well, and I want to describe this defiant power of the human spirit that he then began to exercise as he decided not to commit suicide, like so many did by running into the electric wires and going through his suffering with a sense of retaining his dignity and worth as a human being and his decency, and coming through that whole experience triumphantly. I've recorded the stories of Holocaust survivors that I had the privilege to spend 2 years with in my book, Life's Meaning in the Face of Suffering, the testimony of Holocaust survivors. And one of the most outstanding of them was a 14-year-old girl at the time when she was taken to Auschwitz, where she spent 4 years, called Dina Benedict. And she was the one that caught my attention when we visited the Holocaust organization in Johannesburg, my husband and myself. And she came up to me and said, Hitler could turn us into a heap of dead bodies, but he could not get at us. Wow, that set me off on my doctorate research with the Holocaust survivors. And she described a most riveting experience when she was at first in the Kovno ghetto. And because she didn't look Jewish, they chose her for underground work. But she was caught and brought to the Gestapo headquarters. And there she was confronted with the commander, who said to her, "Don't you realize I've got the authority over life and death? Why don't you bend down and kiss my boots and beg for your life?" And she said she stood as upright as she could, and she answered him calmly, "Yes, whether I live or die is your decision, but that I don't bend down and kiss your boots and beg for my life is mine." And so impressed was this commander with this little slip of a girl having such defiant power to withstand his command that he actually released her. But she then was taken to Auschwitz. And here's a description of the defiant power of the human spirit that she showed forth so magnificently. She says their system was not only to attack you physically, their aim was to attack you morally. They wanted to break you into pieces. They wanted to convert you into an animal, to make you crawl on all fours to beg for a crumb of bread, to break the spirit and the human being, the dignity to a nothing. That was what the aim was in the first place, before they took you to the gas chambers and the mass graves. To me, that was worse than just being shot. To me, the degradation of my personality, of my being human, of my Jewishness, of what I am, to break that, to me, was worse than just being killed. But she said, they could not do a thing to me inwardly. All that they could do to me was physically, but they could not get me there. No matter what they were doing to me, I was above them. They could not kill my romanticism. They could not kill my personal thoughts. They could not kill my life that was in me, my own world. I used to say at that time, come and get me. In me, I've got all my values. In me, I am above you. You are the nothing. You've got the gun, but you are the nothing. The horror of people who have abrogated their humanity. And she said, the more we were depressed, the more we were converted into nothing, the more were our higher thoughts. I think I never ever thought so nobly and so high emotionally and intellectually as then, in hunger, degradation, and in cold and in sufferings. The story of Shantall and these Holocaust survivors bear testimony of the power of the human spirit to overcome the very worst in life. Doing so, they reached untold heights of moral excellence. And of them we can say, Ecce homo, behold this man, behold this woman. What a source of inspiration to all of us.